Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include the Diablo 4 pay-to-win survey controversy, the new Path of Exile expansion details, and PoE 2 information, Destiny 2 releasing a starter pack that was so bad that they had to delist it less than a day later, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. But before I move on, just a quick word from this video's sponsor. I built my website, Riker.com, using Squarespace, and I was able to do everything myself, quickly and easily and with zero education in the field, all thanks to how easy Squarespace is to work with. Watch how easily I update the Diablo 4 section on my website to include all my video coverage of the latest season updates. Squarespace is flexible for any kind of website, with tons of templates that you can easily customize to your needs, no knowledge of coding required. And with their new Fluid engine, it's easier than ever. You just drag and drop elements to move and resize them. You can even set up a custom merch shop with Squarespace now. You just design your products and they handle production, inventory, shipping, all the stuff that would be a nightmare to handle on your own. Basically, if you want to build a website, I recommend Squarespace. It's the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything. Your products, content you create, even your time. And Squarespace is offering my viewers 10% off your first purchase with them. Just go to squarespace.com/Riker or click the link in the description to start your free trial and start building your online presence. That's squarespace.com/RHYKKER and use code Riker to get started today. Kicking things off with some Diablo 4 news. This week we've seen a lot of talk about the alleged leaked Diablo 4 survey. It was Baldur that broke this story. He allegedly was sent this survey. Typically surveys that are sent out to Blizzard customers are sent under the, technically you're not supposed to share them. So someone chose to share it with Baldur. Baldur reported on it, and now multiple other outlets have been reporting on Baldur's reporting. And so what we see is a survey that's asking questions about the pricing of Diablo 4's first expansion. And we see price points from $50 all the way to $100 with different packages, different bundles that include different extras. And some of the extras that we're seeing in this list are deemed problematic by some people in the community, including myself, and this has caused something of an uproar. Blizzard promised no pay to win, and some of the things that we're seeing in here can be classified as pay to win. Now, inoffensive things that we're seeing include cosmetics, a town portal skin, cosmetic armor set for all your characters, cosmetic wings. One is even pretty cool and I actually hope makes it into the game, and it's a new kind of mount that will have a feature where as you achieve more achievements in-game, it'll gain cosmetic upgrades. There's also platinum in-game currency. Fine, you pay money up front to get a discount on in-game currency that you can spend in the shop, sure, whatever. Some of the packages even include a certain amount of currency every season for a year. Some packages include a battle pass. Some packages include a year's worth of battle passes. That's all fine so far, but it starts to get dicey when we get to the 4-day early access. We've had early access happen already. I was opposed to it from the start. I was opposed to it when it happened. I'm still opposed to it for the expansion. To clarify, this is something that did happen with the base Diablo 4. You could pay for a head start. For anyone who cares to be competitive, you kind of got to go for it. But it gets worse from there. The next one is paying for a in-game companion, basically a Diablo 3 pet that follows you around, can pick up stuff, and you can also access your stash from. Now, this is an amazing quality of life feature, and what they say is that you would pay to receive it ahead of everyone else, like a season ahead of everyone else. I think they specifically said 1 season before launch. And again, to be clear, I am not in favor of being able to pay for early access to quality of life. 1 season, that's a full 3 months. Pets that pick up things is something that the community has been asking for. I don't think we need to be paying for convenience items in a full-priced game. Then another thing that's causing contention was stash tabs. You can pay to have 1 or 2 extra stash tabs. Now, my thoughts on paying for stash tabs. Under the right circumstances, I am fine with it. However, that circumstance is if you give players a reasonable enough of free or earnable via gameplay stash tabs. In other words, the average player should have more than enough stash space then you can sell extra stash tabs to the crazy people like me that hoard a million items. I am fine with my personal use needing me to spend money on stash tabs, but the average player should never have to spend money on a stash tab, assuming they're not keeping every item that they find. So Diablo 3, for instance, is exactly in that spot. There is so much stash space that every person can have multiple characters in a season, and they have enough space for all the items they find. They have multiple, there's like 20, I don't know, there's a whole lot, 12 to 17 stash tabs, I forget at this point. There's so many stash tabs, and I'm willing to pay for more in Diablo 3. Because I want more, but I'm unreasonable. Diablo 4 does not give anywhere close to enough stash space currently. So I am not in favor of paid stash tabs in Diablo 4 now. Yes, it's true that they're going to be making changes to itemization where we're not going to need to stack so many codex powers. That's going to help, but it's still not going to be enough. The tiny amount of stash space we have right now compared to Diablo 3, still nowhere near enough before we're starting to charge for stash space. You have 5 classes in the game. It ought to be reasonable for someone to have one of every class and not run out of stash space. Now, we're going to come back to stash space in a little moment here, because there's one last thing, which for me is the most egregious thing, and that is early access to either a unique item or an aspect. So like you would get it again maybe a season before everyone else, or who knows, some amount of time before the expansion. It's not clarified how long before the expansion that you have access to item. That is literally paying for power. There is no other way to interpret that. That is literal pay to win, pay for power, the thing that they have said that they will not do. Now, all that said, I'm opposed to all these things, as we all should be, and we should all vocalize this. All that said, assuming this survey is legit, and I'm inclined to believe it probably is legit, assuming this survey is legit, just because it's in the survey does not mean that this is something that they want to do. Blizzard puts out, or any company for that matter, is going to put out surveys with certain things, and it's so that they can gather data. Now, the fact that it is in the survey does suggest that yes, someone somewhere does think that this is a good idea, or should at least be considered a possibility. These surveys are not made by the devs, some other ancillary team is putting these together, and in theory, what you could have is 99% of employees being opposed to this, but one person in some position wanting to see, and they put it in the survey so that the 99% could say, told you so, players don't want this, and we don't want to put this in the game. Now, this takes us to the campfire chat that happened. I have a full video going over the details here, but in short, they addressed this leaked survey. They didn't mention the survey, but they were very clearly talking about it, because they started off the stream by saying, hey, we just want to address something. There's been a lot of talk about pay to win this week, and they came out swinging with very firm stances that you will not be able to buy power in Diablo 4. Their stance has not changed. It remains the same. And overall, the energy that I get from the two Joes, Joe Pipora, Joe Shelley, the two heads of Diablo 4, is a lot of over my dead body energy, that they are completely opposed to this stuff happening, and they're going to do everything in their power to stop it from happening, and that they feel confident enough in saying that it's not going to happen to put themselves out there and be so firm and declarative about it, because they could have just not said anything. It's, in fact, exceptionally rare that Blizzard addresses a rumor or a leak. So, in sum, the Diablo 4 devs don't want this, we don't want this, we continue to voice ourselves and remind whoever in marketing or whoever is in charge that this is not something that we want or will accept in the game, but this isn't something to crucify the Diablo 4 team over. Not yet, at least. If they do it, sure, but don't come out and call people liars based on a survey. And speaking of that campfire chat, we got a lot of juicy details out of it. We got more details on the Midwinter Blight holiday event that runs from December 12th to January 2nd. The Avatar of Zaeith releases on December 5th, runs until near the end of the season. That's the new endgame pinnacle content with an incredibly powerful reward in it. We also got word that the devs are doing a huge itemization overhaul that will come for Season 4. This is basically Loot 2.0, and I encourage you folks to check out my full video for all the details. Lastly, for Diablo 4 news, we got some patch notes that includes a buff to Glyph XP. Now, this is only for higher tier Nightmare dungeons. Tiers 1 to 17 have no change, but if you're doing tiers 30 and onward, you're going to be getting now more XP, and it seems to be about 20% more from tiers 30 to 50. 30% more starting at tier 50, about 50% more starting at tier 75, and a good 65% more at tier 100. With how fast leveling has been this season, I've seen a lot of complaints about how long and tedious it is to level up the glyphs, so this should help with that. And then in some Diablo 3 news, we got patch notes for patch 2.7.7 Season 30. PTR will run from December 5th through December 12th, and in Season 30, we're getting the Rites of Sanctuary and Visions of Enmity returning. Visions of Enmity was the Season 29 theme, Rites of Sanctuary was the Season 28 theme. That was the Altar of Rites. Both of these were fantastic additions to the game. They're now being brought in nerfed because they were very powerful. So the powers from the altar are all seeing roughly a 50% or more reduction. Sometimes it's very significant, like going from 25% reduced damage to only 5%. But this is understandable given just how much power you get from the altar. That said, they are doing testing in the PTR. If you feel some of these nerfs are too severe, go give that feedback. And then we're getting some massive class balance changes, a huge sweep here. This is going to be a lot of buffs as well as some nerfs. They highlight Wizard Meteor being too strong for too long, which is very true. So we're getting buffs to Might of the Earth, Raykor, Roland Crusader, Aegis of Valor, a Khan set, to the Hammerden build. The Demon Hunter's getting an insane Shadow's Mantle set buff, 120,000% damage, up from 75,000. Marauder's getting a nerf, however. Raymond set gets a buff. Uliana gets a buff. Wave of Light Monk is getting a buff. Triggers a Kiyoshiro more often now. 5 enemies instead of 3. Pestilence Necro, huge buff. Inarius, big buff. Trag'Oul actually gets a nerf. Bone Spear gets a buff. Blood Nova build getting a nerf. They're nerfing all the right things, by the way. Nothing to be upset with here. This is for a better state of balance. We are moving Diablo 3 into a final maintenance mode state, so we want every build to be an S tier build. We want to allow people to play however they want to play and be equally strong with every build. Nerf to Corpse Explosion, Corpse Lance buff, Witch Doctor gets a Jade buff, big Helltooth buff, Mundunugu gets a nerf. That one's a little surprising. Mundunugu didn't seem that much more powerful than the other builds. Big nerf to Arakir though, so it seems they're nerfing the Witch Doctor builds across the board, at least the top ones. Again, another nerf to Zuni's. Honestly, I'm a bit surprised by these nerfs. These were not S tier builds. For Wizard, DMO is getting a buff. Talrasha's getting a nerf, understandably. Talrasha Meteor Wizard was just insane. Big nerf to Meteor builds all around. Even Twister Wizard got a nerf, interestingly enough. So some significant meta shakeups here, and hopefully we're going to see a better state of balance. On to some Destiny 2 news. Bungie announced a delay to the next expansion, the Final Shape. They've pushed it back 4 months. It'll now launch in June 4th, 2024. This 4-month delay was leaked originally following job cuts at Bungie, and Bungie has now come out and confirmed that they delayed it because they needed more time in order to get this big finale of an expansion into the state they want it to be in, which is going to be a bigger and bolder vision than we've previously seen. Bungie says this is the culmination of 10 years of storytelling, and they want to honor that journey by making a memorable experience. Meanwhile, the Season of the Wish went live this week, and with it, quietly also went up a starter pack. This was a $15 bundle available for purchase, and within less than a day, following incredibly terrible reception by the community, making waves in a lot of places, it was delisted. It was something like 17 hours later, it was no longer available for purchase. Now, when you hear starter pack, what do you think? The idea of a starter pack is actually a great idea. Maybe it includes some kind of mission bundle or expansion bundle to get players caught up, brought up to speed. But no, what the Destiny 2 starter pack actually was an assortment of questionably useful things and in quantities that were not enough to justify the ticket price. The pack included 3 weapons that are not particularly good and relatively easy to acquire anyway. There's 2 cosmetic ships, there's some crafting materials, which a new player is probably not going to get too deep into that kind of stuff, and there's not even enough of it to really accomplish much. And there's some in-game currency, but altogether, just spending that money on a season pass would get you more value for your dollar. So in response, the Destiny 2 team tweeted, "Hey everyone, we launched Season of the Wish yesterday, and have been monitoring the conversation around what you've been enjoying and what you haven't. We'll start things off with the starter pack, which is not something bringing joy, which is why we've pulled it from stores. Whether it's going to be replaced with an actual starter pack or something else entirely or nothing at all is unclear, but hey, at least they were fast to walk things back. In some Path of Exile news, we got the reveal of the new Path of Exile expansion, Affliction, and a reveal of the new Mercenary class for Path of Exile 2. This class is bringing shooter gameplay to PoE. Check out my full video right over here going through the gameplay. But this is going to be a huge game changer. It's bringing WASD movement, WASD. This is a full, real shooter experience inside Path of Exile. And this has got to be my new favorite class. But then as for the Affliction expansion coming on December 8th, this is all about evil, spoopy druids. We're seeing the return of Ultimatum League with this expansion. We're seeing the introduction of over 100 transfigured gems. These are alternate versions of existing gems that have different functionality and balance. We also have the Affliction Challenge League. As you're running around, you're going to run into these sacred wisps that open portals to the Viridian Wildwood. This is an area that has an affliction covering it with a foreboding darkness. Once you're in there, wisps are going to follow you, pushing back the darkness, but there's only so much darkness you can push back before your wisps run out of juice. While you're fighting monsters in the Wildwood, you'll run into other different types of wisps trapped in the darkness. You collect them, and then once you leave the Wildwood, the wisps will disperse from you and possess random monsters on your map, powering them up and increasing their rewards. With this league, we're also getting 3 new Wildwood Ascendancies. These can be taken in addition to your regular Ascendancy, so you don't have to choose one or the other. You get Wildwood Ascendancies on top of your regular one. You can only have one Wildwood Ascendancy selected at any given time, however, but you can always respec. The Warden of the Magi Ascendancy lets you coat your weapons in tinctures, granting you special bonuses. These tinctures occupy a flask slot, and you can equip as many of them as you want, and they can be toggled on and off, but you can only have one tincture active at a time. However, it sounds like you'll want to still have more than one equipped in your flask slots because they're really useful but very situational. And it seems these are actual items that you get either as drops or something, so they're actual items that you are putting. They roll with affixes and you can put them in your flask slot. Then there's the Warlock of the Mists Ascendancy. This lets you consume corpses to get a bonus against monsters of the type of corpse that you consumed. There's also a whole mechanic where you can buy additional corpses of exotic monster types. This is in case you want to fight, Shaper or something and you can't get that monster type to drop. But then what you do with the corpses is up to you. You can either consume them to gain a buff, or you can combine this with, regular skills, turn them into specters to make a really powerful minion build. And then lastly, there's the Wildwood Primalist Ascendancy, which is basically Build-A-Bear with an Ascendancy. You get to take special drops and rewards and use them to build out your own customized Ascendancy. Really cool ideas, this league, and I look forward to seeing what players think once it goes live. In other news, the Game Awards are coming up on December 7th, and host and producer Jeff Keighley has stated that security will be heightened this year. Last year's Game Awards, as well as Gamescom opening night, just a few months back, both saw disruptions with people from the audience coming up on stage, either sneaking up, pretending to be part of the group, or otherwise just getting on stage and saying nonsense, which, yeah, sure, you can say it was funny, but now we've established this precedent of idiots rushing the stage for who knows what, and so hopefully that's not going to happen anymore.
Real quick, I want to thank everybody and say that I think I want to nominate this award to my Reformed Orthodox Rabbi Bill Clinton. Thank you, everybody.
I'm not allowed to say anything about it. Yes, exactly. All right. Well, guys. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. Really disappointed. They're disappointed.
Now, we spoke about the Golden Joystick Awards in a previous video. Those are 100% established by popular vote. I don't want to reduce it to saying it's a popularity contest, but it's all anyone could go and put their votes for the Golden Joysticks Awards. However, for the Game Awards, 90% of the power goes to an assortment of over 100 gaming journalists worldwide from different countries and different outlets, and then 10% is influenced by public vote. So there's a judge selection process amongst gaming journalism outlets and journalists. And the 10% public vote basically means if there's a tie amongst those judges, the popular vote will swing it. I know some people hate video game journalists and feel that it should be 100% popular vote. The thing is, popular votes are so easy to manipulate. You just get the world's biggest YouTuber to say, hey, everyone go vote for this, and things get brigaded. And even if you don't see that kind of stuff, it's still just a popularity contest rather than it necessarily going to who might actually deserve it, because you probably haven't played every game that released in 2023. You probably haven't played every contender for awards. Whereas gaming journalists, say what you want about them, they do play a lot more games by necessity. If they're reviewing games, they have to be playing a lot of games. That's part of why they're bad at games, because every week you're playing a different game. I went through this when I worked as a gaming journalist a decade ago. So at least the journalists, hopefully, have actually played all the games that they're voting on. And again, we still have the Golden Joystick Awards for the popular vote. Then in some World of Warcraft news, Season of Discovery launched this week for WoW Classic. It's basically like an arcade mode for WoW Classic. If you're participating, if you've tried it out, do sound off in the comments. This is kind of like a crazy new idea for WoW. Let me know how it's going. Is this something you're enjoying? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you want them to continue with it? Let's hear your thoughts. Because outside of that, in an interview with IGN, Warcraft General Manager John Haidt has expressed that they are looking to expand outside of games. This is when they were asked about making another movie or maybe a TV series. He said, quote, "We start with games, but we are going to expand beyond that. And we are going to branch into other things, but first we want people to start seeing this as not just a single game, but really a plan for the future." The Duncan Jones Warcraft movie came out in 2016. It was good, not amazing, not terrible. For a video game movie, it was pretty good. My understanding is it did not perform all that well at the box office in North America, but was saved by China. It performed exceptionally well in China, which is why I heard rumors that a sequel was being planned that was going to be tailored more for a Chinese audience. We haven't heard anything about that. Relations with China have soured at this point, both between North America and China, but also Blizzard and China with regards to Blizzard and their Chinese partner, or former Chinese partner, Tencent. And I do hope we get a series, in fact. I think a movie for something like Warcraft, we need more time to develop story and to fit in all this myriad of fascinating characters that people love. In other news, Creative Assembly, the developers of the Total War franchise, are apparently being refocused on RTS games, which you would think is a given. They launched over a dozen Total War games over about 2 decades or more. That's what they're known for, that's what they do really well. And then Sega, the owner of Creative Assembly, said in 2017, you know what guys, we're gonna put you to work. And we're gonna put you to work on a sci-fi multiplayer co-op PvEVP FPS game. Well, after 6 years of development on that, after there was a public demo for this game called Hyenas at Gamescom, I should have tried it, Sega canceled the project. A bunch of people from Creative Assembly were laid off, and now the boss of Sega has gone and said, yeah, Creative Assembly is really good at RTS games, maybe we'll have them work on those again. That's like hiring acclaimed classical composer of movie scores Ennio Morricone to create a hip-hop album. But I'll tell you the truth of why it happened. RTS games don't make enough money. I say this as someone who grew up on RTS, I love RTS, I did love RTS. I don't play much anymore, but the sad reality is they just don't have a big enough market. Whereas multiplayer FPS, that's where all the money is. So Sega thought, you know what, these guys don't make FPS games, but let's give it a try. It's a calculated risk. After 6 years, it didn't pay off. And it's just sad that a bunch of people had to lose their jobs over it. Then, onto some Baldur's Gate 3 news. Patch 5 released this week, which is a really big patch, and among other things, it fixed a, I want to say, funny bug? It wasn't funny for people suffering from it. It was making the game basically unplayable. But what was happening was, the more crimes you committed, in essence, the worse your game's performance. Let me clarify. Act 3. A bug was introduced in patch 4. There's a mechanic in the game for handling theft and vandalism that doesn't go noticed. So earlier in the game, there were these scrying eyes that would immediately call guards if you were stealing or vandalizing, even if you were stealthed. Be it sneaking, be it invisible. So patch 4 brought a fix to stop you from getting reported for these. The thing is, while you weren't being reported for them, they weren't being ignored. They were just starting to pile up and pile up and pile up. So the more crimes you were committing, the more crimes are being stored in memory, and the worse your game performance becomes until it's eventually unplayably laggy. That said, patch 5 released, supposedly fixed the bug. I don't I haven't seen a report whether it actually fixed it or not, but we'll trust Larian and assume that they did fix it. And the patch also has a lot more stuff in it. I mean, the update itself is 30 gigs and requires 130 gigs of free space to install. They recommend that if you don't have that free space to just uninstall the game completely and re-download the patched version. But the update includes brand new epilogue scenes, an honor mode, and more. In honor mode, you have one save file. Everything hurts, and bosses have new tricks. Something really cool is custom mode, where you can customize your experience, tweak settings, mix and match, so you can hide the required roll to succeed on dice checks, which makes things more realistic and D&D-like. You can hide enemy HP, again, to get a more tabletop experience. You can make short rests fully heal the party. You can disable death saving throws. You can hide failed perception checks. And they've also included other performance improvements, reduced memory leaks, RAM, VRAM use, and more. In other news, do we have any Tribes fans? Because a new Tribes game is on its way. Tribes 3 Rivals has been announced, and developer Prophecy Games is looking to begin large-scale testing. Playtest sessions happened this week. The game has appeared in Steam with a 2024 release date. The game's still in early stages of development, and visually it's looking a lot like Tribes Ascend. And it makes sense because a lot of people who worked on Tribes Ascend are working on this one. Tribes has had a lot of history. Way back in 1998, Star Siege Tribes released, developed by Dynamics and published by Sierra Online. Then Dynamics made Tribes 2 in 2001, and Sierra Online closed the studio as part of Sierra's restructuring under Vivendi. Meanwhile, Tribes Aerial Assault was developed for the PS2 and released in 2002. That was basically just a PS2 simplified version of Tribes 2, still published under Sierra but made by a completely different team. And then, because Vivendi had the rights to Tribes, they put Irrational Games to work on Tribes Vengeance, which released in 2004. Irrational was known for System Shock 2. Ken Levine served as a writer for the story in Tribes Vengeance, which is historically just a multiplayer game without a single-player campaign, but they introduced one with Tribes Vengeance. Sales were poor, however, and a year later, 2005, all support for Tribes Vengeance was dropped. Then we didn't hear anything about Tribes for a while. But in 2009, a company called Instant Action, which was known for making 3D browser-based games, announced that they had acquired the rights to Tribes, and they were working on a browser-based version of Star Siege Tribes. An open beta was scheduled for a few months after their reveal, but that kept getting pushed back and pushed back. The game was shown that year at PAX, it was playable, but then Instant Action went bankrupt, sold off the rights to Tribes to Hi-Rez Studios, and a year later, they were defunct. So now Hi-Rez Studios has the rights to Tribes. Now, they had been formed a few years earlier and they were working on a game called Global Agenda. I played that back in the day, I was a fan. They had released Global Agenda in 2010, and then they started working on Tribes Ascend, which ultimately released in 2012, after some open beta, open alpha development. But a year after release, Hi-Rez stopped development on Tribes Ascend, focused all their efforts on making Smite. But despite this, a small team kept working on Tribes. In 2015, a patch released, and a final update on the game was released in 2016. Then in 2018, the game was delisted from Steam entirely. Again, we didn't hear anything about Tribes for a while until May of this year, when a company called Prophecy Games teased that they were working on a Tribes game. Prophecy Games was originally founded in 2019 under the umbrella of Hi-Rez. But then in early 2020, they spun off to be an independent studio, and they got to take Tribes with it. So they had the rights, and they had most of the talent that had worked, or a good portion of the talent left at Hi-Rez that had worked on Tribes Ascend. So, all this to say, it's been quite a journey for Tribes. If you were a fan of Tribes Ascend, this game is its successor. I enjoyed Tribes Ascend. It was a shame that it just couldn't become a financial success. I like that old school of FPS. I'm from the arena shooter days, Unreal Tournament, Quake, Tribes, all that stuff. Tribes is such an interesting game because of the skiing mechanic. For anyone who doesn't know, Tribes is a game where you have jetpacks, and as part of some bug that became embraced as a feature, you can skate down slopes, building up momentum, and it makes for a really really interesting movement system that you don't see in any other game. It allows for some really high skill ceiling traversals of maps, making capture the flag really interesting with crazy chases going on. I hope this does end up taking off. I'm just concerned that there's no longer an audience for this kind of classic FPS. In another quick story, we got an official release date for Dragon's Dogma 2. March 22nd is when the long-awaited sequel to the classic JRPG from 2012 releases. And lastly, folks, this week we got a first look at Amazon's Fallout series. I got a full video analyzing, discussing what we've seen in pictures and what we got as actual details. It's the people of Westworld who are making this. That makes me very excited. I know people have a lot of concerns because it's Amazon that is running it, but I mean, they're just funding it, right? They're not necessarily having any creative input. Westworld was amazing. I got a good feeling about this one. I know a lot of you folks don't, though, but again, if you haven't seen the news and heard all the details that are making me hyped for this Fallout series, do check that out. Because that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discussed how a Starfield dev told a reviewer that he's basically wrong to feel bored about an aspect of the game. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.